If you are passionate about sharing dairy story with consumers and want to know how to turn that into a career, well, keep listening to hear how Allison Ryan has done just that. As the Marketing and Communications Director for MVP Dairy and McCarty Family Farms, she has brought the vision to life for an on-farm dairy learning center in Salina, Ohio, and will soon be cutting the ribbon on a second interactive learning center near Rexford, Kansas. And she's joining us today to talk about the opportunities for young professionals who want to make their passion their career right here on the Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders Podcast. This is the special podcast series for producers and professionals in the first 5 years of their dairy careers. And you can find it right here on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, as well as its own platform, Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and it's my mission to connect you with others who are like you, driven to make a difference and determined to do it in the dairy industry. Whether you are on the farm or in the field, this is a place to plug in to hear how your peers are overcoming challenges and stepping up to lead the way as dairy's future innovators, decision makers, and movers and shakers. If you know someone in the first 5 years of their dairy career, send them a link to the show that's created just for them. Let's hear today from Allison Ryan from MVP Dairy and McCarty Family Farms. So Allison, some of our folks listening may be familiar with MVP Dairy. They may be familiar with McCarty Family Farms. Explain the connection between the two.
MVP Dairy is located in Northwest Ohio, and it's actually a partnership dairy between the McCarty family and the Van Tilburg family. The MVP stands for McCarty Van Tilburg Partnership. It's actually a farm that was built in 2018 that showcases a lot of the latest technology in dairy, as well as has an on-site learning center.
So in Northwest Kansas, that's really the home and the hub for McCarty Family Farms. But it's more than just milking cows that goes on there. So give us a little insight of what McCarty Family looks like in its home area of Kansas.
McCarty Family Farms is located near Colby, Kansas. So basically about 15 miles off of Route 70 in a little burg of Rexford, Kansas. And there we actually are in the process of finishing up a new build. So traditionally our flagship dairy, located just down the road from the new dairy, housed our first farm in Kansas. That has since grown to now 4 different sites that houses cows in Kansas and one in Nebraska. It's also home to our evaporative milk condensing plant. So we do actually, instead of sending fluid milk down the road, we're actually sending a condensed milk.
Allison, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm the Marketing and Communications Director here at MVP Dairy and from McCarty Family Farms. Grew up about 30 minutes from where our farm is here in Salina, Ohio. Grew up on a registered Holstein herd. My family still farms, but this, of course, is not my family's farm. But I make that point because I have been in the dairy world my entire life.
So speaking of that, being in the dairy world your entire life, you have a really interesting career path that has led you to be a very important part of a farm that may not be the family farm you grew up on, but has really become family for you. So tell us about the path and how you got to where you're at.
I'm actually a Buckeye, so born and raised in Ohio, went to school at Ohio State University and studied agricultural communications there with an animal science minor that I basically focused everything, my electives and things on dairy. Of course, did the dairy judging thing and essentially wanted to pursue a career that allowed me to connect consumers with dairy farms and dairy farmers. And actually, it was kind of a good timing, for better or worse. But I graduated in 2008 from OSU. And it was really right when the public started kind of making the transition of wanting to know more where their food came from. And so traditional ag comm jobs, a lot of times it's basically ag media talking to ag media. And this was really kind of a shift in our career in terms of, okay, we've got to figure out a way to connect with consumers about what we're doing on the farm. And so I actually found a position at the time with the American Dairy Association Mideast, which is the local checkoff program for Ohio and West Virginia, and worked on what at the time we kind of called the Ohio Dairy Image campaign. So basically bringing a dairy farm story to life and putting it in ways that everyone can understand.
So you just kind of walked through an interesting time and transition in the industry, really, when, as you said, that switch really flipped from where consumers were more and more concerned about where their food was coming from and wanting to know more, wanting to ask questions that in the industry we maybe hadn't been used to answering at a high level before. Was there a moment? Was there like a moment where something changed for you that really said your path is in alignment with that purpose?
So the funny thing is, I probably didn't realize it at the time, but I was kind of that 4-H'er at the state fair talking to everyone that was coming through the barns about, they would ask me silly questions, oh, are those the cows that make chocolate milk? And, or why are your cows skinny? Or things like that, that I just always really enjoyed sharing about them. When I figured out later on that I could make a career out of it, that was really something I became very passionate about. And honestly, a lot of my classmates, even within animal sciences at Ohio State, were not from farms. And so just really seeing even that I had classmates that are studying dairy or studying animal science that are not from a farm, I really thought, wow, there's this void that really needs filled. And it was also crazy because that was also around the same time that social media was really starting to pick up, and it really gave us a platform to head in that direction.
So you came into this field at an interesting and pivotal point in time. And what you just talked about, Allison, was how really being that advocate for agriculture and that communicator to those outside of the industry was something you were doing naturally already. It was something you were really passionate about, something that you felt a need and a pull to do, and just found yourself in these places to do it. And there's a lot of other young people in the dairy industry right now that have that same experience. And they're looking at, how can I take my desire to educate consumers, to be able to take those messages and give people the experience of understanding where their food comes from and make that into a career. Through your experience with American Dairy Association Mideast, you got to start doing that. But then you ended up taking that to an entirely new level. So let's segue into how you got connected with McCarty Family Farms and MVP Dairy, and just take a moment to also explain the relationship between those two entities.
I had been at the Dairy Association for, I guess at the time, probably 12 years. And, as I mentioned before, a lot of my experience there was connecting consumers with their food. And it was kind of a very good timing, I guess, in being a little bit lucky that at the same time I had moved back to where I'm originally from. So moved back to Western Ohio right around the time that MVP Dairy was being built. And so, of course, it's on my radar of, hey, there's this new dairy going in. What are they about? Who are they? And through my job, the job at the time, part of my job was to get to know them and see how we could help them. And when I did that, I really found out that, hey, they were looking to open an on-site dairy learning center. And that was really driven by the farms that are involved with MVP Dairy. McCarty's are 4th generation dairy farmers originally from Pennsylvania, whereas the Van Tilburg, the V and MVP, are grain farmers, 4th generation grain farmers right here in Ohio. And essentially, they met by chance looking to purchase the same dairy and decided it made more sense for them to basically work together and build a dairy from the ground up. And that kind of gave them the luxury of like, hey, we can welcome in people. We can let consumers come in and see what we're doing. We do milk 4,500 cows here at MVP. And so the size is maybe also not what people in our area were traditionally accustomed to. So we were even finding that a lot of people had questions just about who we were and what we were going to be about. And so that pivot happened around the same time I was getting to know them. And that was a lot of my expertise. And we kind of just started working together on, hey, what can we do to set this up and make this a great learning experience? And to be quite honest, I thought I was kind of committing to helping them with a viewing deck space with maybe some information. And it kind of evolved with ideas that I was sharing and ideas they were sharing into what is now a basically 15,000 square foot experience that has more than 10,000 visitors every year. And really, it was kind of cool to see. We were looking at, okay, where's everyone coming from? And we've now had visitors from 65 countries and 47 states. So it's been a awesome experience to help this grow. And I should say, somewhere along the lines of me helping put this together, they kind of convinced me to stick around and make it a full-time gig. And it's been great.
So I've been to MVP Dairy and to this learning center. And as you said, Allison, this is like your observation deck on steroids. So one thing I'm curious about is, as you were having these initial conversations with the McCarty family and the Van Tillenberg family, what was their vision for the impact that some sort of learning center effort would have on the local community and beyond?
Some of those really early conversations were, by trade, they're all farmers. So to them, it's second nature. And part of their passion is to farm transparently. And they're proud of what they do. And they wanted to kind of be able to bring that to life. And, knowing just from some people that they would have assumed knew what they would be about or what dairy farming was about, they really had to sort of take a step back and reflect on, like, wow, I really didn't know how much of a need there was to share this story. And so it was really both of us from the get-go deciding, hey, what's the correct level of information that we share? What are your goals with this visitor center? And I think we can all say that it's really kind of exceeded our expectations at this point in terms of the acceptance and the excitement that people have when they come and visit us.
For someone who hasn't been to the Learning Center at MVP, just give us a walkthrough tour in our minds of what they would see and experience when they enter the door.
Some of the first things that people see when they visit, they're actually greeted by ag student interns that we have and work with that do host day-to-day visitors. And they basically start their journey from learning about the farms and the people behind it, because to us, that's really important that people know that there are still families involved in our farm here. And so I'm sharing a little bit more about the history of both the families, as well as then transitioning to everything we're doing in field, because then we actually talk basically milk's journey from soil to cup. And so we do a lot with regenerative agricultural practices, and we actually do a lot of recording and capturing on, essentially our soil health and sequestering carbon and, all those questions that are out there in terms of our dairy farmers farming sustainably. We really address that at that point. And then we transition into animal care, and we start right with calf care, because we all know in our dairy world, people always want to know, are those calves taken care of? And then we go into more about our adult cows, and then everyone can do an overlook of our 80 cow carousel parlor. They can actually go out on a viewing deck and look over. And then if it is a scheduled group, we do have a shuttle that'll actually take you through the freestyle barns. We have six-row tunnel ventilated style barns, and everyone can kind of take a look at how those work and provide comfort for the cows. And they also go through our feed barn and can see a little bit of some of the environmental practices in action.
So when you built the facility, it wasn't just that the learning center was a place for people to come and experience and see things firsthand. Really, the whole facility was constructed for a tour bus to be able to drive through and to take people through the journey alongside the cows. And so there's also some interactive digital educational tools, right?
Everything that we have in display there are things that we're actually doing and using, right? So one of the questions that we have pretty frequently is, okay, are these cows all females or are they all males? And how does that work? We actually partnered with Select Sires to do a game that basically explains genetics at a very basic level that people can interact in a game and they can actually mate their cow. We also have 2 virtual reality stations that ADA Mideast sponsored one of our displays to basically virtually put someone in the freestyle barn and kind of go through the different amenities in the barn. Because if someone just stops in, they're not always guaranteed the shuttle bus. Those are always kind of a pre-planned thing. But it's amazing to see kids do the VR and understand, what a cow brush is and how the flush system works and that, because then when they do go in the barn, it's funny because you overhear them telling their parents what those things are. So it's like, it's effective. We have some fun yogurt cup games. They look literally like a giant cup of yogurt where kids can match and just interact with. And of course, we call it our milk carton game, that it's a drag and drop, build the dairy kind of style to explain the family story to the kids that come in. The final spot in the Learning Center is actually a digital touchscreen grocery store. So it's a dairy case, and the idea is it's all touchscreen, so you can actually touch one of the products and you learn a fact about it. And that's all based off of frequently asked questions.
So you were really involved in really putting the vision together for what the Learning Center would look like at MVP Dairy. But that's not the only project that you've been involved in your career with McCarty Family Farms and MVP. And in fact, there's a really cool project that is almost at completion right now. Tell us a little bit about the next project.
We built MVP in the Learning Center in 2018, and we've basically taken that model, both the farm facilities, the free stalls and the milking parlor, and the idea of welcoming in the public, and did kind of a copy paste with improvements, and have created, or in the process, the dairy itself is in final stages. We've got cows in there on 2 120 carousels, and one of them actually does have the viewing area that overlooks it. And we're in the process of finishing up a learning center actually on site in Kansas. And so a lot of the learnings that we've done here, we've taken and improved upon it. But we'll have a visitor center at McCarty Family Farms this spring that will be doing a grand opening. So we're pretty excited about it.
And when is the date slated for a grand opening of this second learning center?
Right now, we've got it set for the second week in April. So after that, we'll be transitioning into opening it up to the public, working with schools to get school groups coming through there, as well as working with community groups. We do a lot of groups here at MVP, like Rotary clubs, young leader groups, really all walks of life, both in ag and out. And the idea is to kind of replicate that in Kansas, but we've just got to get it up and going.
So this is exciting, Allison, that you've been able to replicate this incredible learning center from Ohio into the facility in Kansas. And so one thing I'm curious about is that in the past couple of years, the advancement of technology and teaching tools has just exploded. I mean, we see it with our children and how they learn at school. We see it if you ever take your children on a field trip to a museum. The way that they can interact and learn. You touched on the virtual reality in Ohio, and you also talked about some of the digital ways of learning. What gets you most excited about what this learning center in Kansas will have to offer for the way that people experience where their food comes from?
One thing we did not do here at MVP and are completing in Kansas as we speak is this immersive experience around how we use water on the farm. So one of the things that being in Northwest Kansas, water use is a huge issue, and ensuring that we're using every drop of water in the most responsible way possible. That's one of the most common questions we get out that way. And so we've actually dedicated a really big space in our learning center where people can actually use more of that immersive technology where it feels like they're in a situation and they can see how water is flowing throughout the farm. So I'm pretty excited to see that come to life because, it's looking at things on paper or on the computer just never does it justice when we actually can bring it to life and have that up and running. I'm super excited for that.
Yeah, that is really exciting. When you talk about this project and the other project, let's just take a moment to step back and look at your leadership and your management and bringing all of these pieces together. And so for young dairy professionals and producers that are out there listening to this podcast, I think one of the really valuable things that you could share, Allison, is a little bit about the insights of your process for taking a few ideas and bringing together a vision and executing that in such a way that these are some of the most state-of-the-art dairy educational facilities in the country, and you've had a hand in bringing them to life. So break out. What are the stages of planning and development that you've come to follow when you have your hand in bringing these ideas to reality?
Really, at the beginning stages, it's really finding out, okay, what are your goals in terms of what kind of people are you wanting to attract? Our learning centers are actually 501c3s, and it's a way for us to give back to the community. So for us, it is wanting to be that space that we aren't really charging an arm and a leg for someone to come visit. Where it's more about the experience and being able to offer a very inexpensive experience to families and school-age kids alike. And, that's one of the goals that we looked at. The other things is we know all walks of life are going to come in here. So thinking about, okay, is it just school groups? Are they adults? How can we connect with both of them? How can we share information that is relevant to a 6-year-old and still relevant to a 60-year-old? It's really figuring out who your audience is and then figuring out what's going to resonate with them. How can we put it in terms that they're going to understand? Obviously, we're staying away from industry jargon. We're trying to find some shared values, things that are important to us that are also important to the consumer. And really everything tends to be modeled after the frequently asked questions that I've experienced, they've experienced throughout being in the dairy world. I would say one of the biggest pieces of it is then once we kind of had that together and that idea, we then work with an agency that can do all the technology and the programming and help bring the vision to life. And we specifically work with one that's not necessarily a dairy-centric one that has the dairy involvement that we have, but a group that can also offer perspective that we're not already seeing. So involving as many people in the process as possible, I would say, is also one of the key things.
So as you explain these steps in the process of taking an idea and bringing it to life, there's a couple of things that really stick out as I listen to you walk through that. And a couple of the very first things you talked about, Allison, are the basics that sometimes people forget, right? But number one, be clear on your goals of who your audience is intended to be. And so you talked about that with wanting to say, okay, we want to set this up as a service to our community. We want to attract families. We want to attract kids, but also be equipped for other people and in other age groups that could potentially be a part of this. But that was really being clear on the vision and the purpose. And then step number 2 was understanding what is it that they care about and how can you connect with them on their level? Would you say those are 2 of the most foundational steps for marketing in general?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You said it perfectly, because whether you're connecting in person at a visitor center or online on social media, or even with a neighbor at the grocery store, trying to find that shared value is huge. And really that's a key piece of connecting with people and sharing the story about how dairy foods are made.
So when it comes to shared values, one of the things that you mentioned that's unique about the Kansas facility is how it will address what happens to water. And that resonates, that matters to the local community because water is something that they are concerned about and you're equally concerned about. And so any other examples of some shared values that you've been able to bring into some of the key points or the ways that you're communicating through the new facility?
One of the general concerns that people have when they step foot on a larger scale dairy farm is always, how are you taking care of all these cows and giving them the individualized care that I need? A lot of times, and generally TV doesn't do us any justice in terms of how modern dairy farms are portrayed today. So there's always a different idea in someone's head of wanting to see those cows out on green pastures and wanting to see, and it's really just about where we're located and what works for us as a farm, right? We try to walk visitors through what we do on our farm to ensure that every cow every day has the best care possible. And part of that also is while this is how we do it, it may not be how someone else does it. And so we also, while we're at it, try to be a good representation of all dairy and explain that, hey, there are other ways to also do a great job. And so that is one of our biggest values. And people want to know that their food's being responsibly produced. And that's one way we show them.
Allison, one thing that's really unique is you have been able to successfully do something that I hear many young people in the dairy community talk about, and that's taking their passion for advocacy for agriculture and really turning it into a career. And you've been able to do that. And so just speak for a moment to how other young dairy professionals and producers can find their own opportunities or create their own path to do what you've done.
There are so many opportunities available to young dairy leaders and young dairy advocates. And a lot of that really starts with internship opportunities, because before I actually entered the workforce, did a handful of internships to make sure that, hey, I was on the right path and start that learning process. And so reaching out to individuals that are in jobs that you want to be in, or in jobs or career paths that you would like to learn more about, I think is a great way to get started. And whether it be that you are a student that's looking for your first job, or an intern looking for a unique experience, a couple networks come to mind: the Dairy Girl Network, reaching out to your checkoff program. There are, and I believe it's Hordes, always has a list of dairy internships that people can essentially look for, because they're there. You just have to look. If someone's looking to be more of an advocate for their home farm, or maybe something on the side, social media is such a great platform today to really get out and just share what you're doing. I think sometimes we overlook the very basics of advocacy, and it's really just having those conversations with your neighbors or with your extended family or with your friends that are not involved with dairy. And so there's different levels that people can be involved in.
When we look at the opportunities that there are for young people, young producers, young professionals in the industry at large, but let's really hone in on McCarty Family Farms and MVP Dairy, because you mentioned how valuable internships were to you. And so internships are something that MVP and McCarty Family Farms offers. So just give our listeners a little bit of a snapshot of what the opportunities do look like within those organizations.
Right now, our internship offerings are really based in our learning centers. At MVP, it's a little bit more established because we've been up and going for a few years now, whereas McCarty Family Farms, we're really just starting out and would probably be looking at spring into summer to start doing internship programs there. But basically, the internship opportunities we have give students general communication skills. They learn a lot about the dairy industry, and they learn to connect with people from all walks of life. We also get into some social media content creation and some general communications things. So some graphic design in regards to all things in the Learning Center. So everyone gets a really good hands-on experience that comes through here. And because there's always so much to do and such a variety of things, we like to really tailor it to that individual person. If someone is really excited about graphic design, we will make sure that we feed those types of things to that individual. If someone's really passionate about public speaking, we find, they are our perfect guide in the Learning Center, and of course, actually gained a lot of experience there as well. Some other opportunities right now that are pretty exciting is that we are looking to fill a coordinator position in the new Learning Center. So I'm looking for someone to be able to lead those efforts and work with building that internship program.
So that's not an internship in that case. That's an actual opportunity to do what you do in Kansas.
Here at MVP, it's myself as well as another young lady that manages a lot of the day-to-day stuff with our Learning Center. And essentially we're looking to replicate that in Kansas. But because we're in kind of the early stages of that, the position would be very unique and be able to really grow with our business. So they're coming into a position that they have a chance to kind of make it their own.
But you know what would be one of the greatest benefits of that position? They get to work and learn from you.
I really enjoy what I do, and I'm always happy to share my experiences. And that's part of why we really like doing the internship programs, because I love seeing students grow, and I love being able to offer those opportunities, because for me, that's really where I got to today, was through internship opportunities.
Well, and so take a moment and I want you to think about this audience that listens to our Young Leaders podcast. So first 5 years of their dairy careers, maybe some are just in a position where they could still do an internship. Some of them might be in position to look for those full-time opportunities, whether it's with the Learning Center like you have or in some other aspect of agriculture, advocacy, promoting dairy in a professional, full-time way. If you were to go back and give some advice to yourself in the first 5 years of your dairy career, what would your advice be to 25-year-old Allison?
So I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and share some advice that I did get as a 25-year-old. And I still use it today with everything that I do. And it really applies beyond, it's advice that I take with my job, with my relationships, with everything. And it's, if you ever find yourself in a situation that maybe you're not feeling challenged, or there's something that's not quite right with your job or with your friendship or relationship, it's really taking the time to reflect back on what effort and what you are putting into that situation. And I've really always kept that, because it's easy for people to just kind of accept the circumstance without taking that time to really reflect on, okay, what can I be doing more that might give me a better outcome? And I will add one other piece of advice, which I know we've kind of already talked about it, but I really want to make sure that everyone hears it, is to not be scared to ask for help within professionals that are already in those types of positions. Because I mean, myself and other colleagues I know are always more than happy to at least even just shadow or talk or really take the time to share more about opportunities that are out there.
And Allison, with all of your experience, there's no doubt that you are and will be an incredible mentor to others, because as you just said, people did that for you. And so I'm just curious, who was your greatest mentor in your career?
I feel like I've been fortunate to have several mentors, both within my family and, older siblings, and being the youngest. But from a career perspective, Jenny Crabtree, who I would say was my first boss being out of college. And really, it was kind of funny because her and then the CEO at the time, or still is actually CEO, I cold called them. And so being an adult in a career now, I kind of laugh at that, because I kind of think, God, they probably thought, who is this person calling and trying to get a job? And I know nothing about this person, but she just called the CEO. So they really kind of took a chance on me. And like I said, it was really good timing with the need in matching that with what my passion was. And she had been in her career path for 15 years prior, and really just was able to share a lot of her experiences. And I still very much appreciate her advice today. And even though I no longer work with her, still have a great relationship.
Yeah. And that was the first 12 years of your career.
It was very much a sink or swim type of situation when I started there, because it was, like I said, it was it was actually a new position that they had never had either.
You reflect on that, those first 12 years of your career and the influential people that made that possible. And you've been with MVP and McCarty's for how long now?
5 years. So now I have a whole another new set of mentors. And it's crazy because I went from really working with a position that had primarily a lot of females to now they just all happen to be brothers. It's been fun because they offer a whole new set of perspective and a whole new opportunity for me to learn. So they have greatly become mentors in many different ways as well.
And as we wrap up here on this Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders podcast, anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to take the time to, thank you for letting me join you on your podcast. I've had a great time and I'm hoping to hear from someone. So even if someone just wants to have a discussion about maybe they're thinking about a career path that sounds like something I'm doing or on some of the opportunities we have available, I just want to encourage people to reach out.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Allison. You just heard from Allison Ryan with MVP Dairy and McCarty Family Farms, where she serves as the Marketing and Communications Director. Thank you for listening to the Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders Podcast. Find these episodes on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, and you can also find Uplevel Dairy Young Leaders Podcast on its very own channel. And do your friends a favor and share this with them if they are in the first 5 years of their dairy career and looking for a place to plug in with others who are driven to make a difference and determined to do it through dairy. And if you like this episode, make sure to give us a review, and you can join the Uplevel Dairy community at upleveldairy.com. So every time a new episode drops, you can receive a notification right in your inbox.